think people's excitement about tea is partly because they are discovering loose leaf tea for the first time, and they had no idea. If you're a tea bag drinker initially, you actually have no idea what is inside the bag. And when you start looking at loose leaf tea, you find there is a huge variety, huge range of colours, shapes, forms, manufacturing styles, etc. And when you start looking at those, it becomes something that absolutely grabs you, all ages. And people have never thought before about where those tea leaves have come from. Do they just come in a packet? Do they grow on a bush, on a tree, or what is it? What is a tea? What is a herbal? What's good for you? All those questions immediately start popping up, and having started exploring, they find that there is far more to it than they ever imagined, and so it takes you on a journey, and so you discover the sort of basics of tea, the Indian teas, the Sri Lankan teas, the teas from Africa, teas from China, from Japan. And it's a complicated journey, and there's an awful lot to learn. But then as you start to understand that each individual village or region or country will be producing something very individual, because like wine, the topography, the climate, the weather, the kind of plant within the tea plant family you're growing will all make a difference to the flavour and aroma that you have in your cup.
Just like wine in some ways.
It's just like wine. With wine, you only get one crop a year. With tea, you harvest through the growing period, which can be from early spring to autumn. In some areas, it's right through the year. If somewhere like Kenya is right on the equator, then the tea plant will just go on growing right through the year. And there will always be peak seasons, depending on winds and cold and frost, etc. But you get cropping right through the growing season. So you've got tea being grown. It will vary throughout the seasons from week to week, day to day, etc., etc. And once people start to just grasp those rudiments of tea production, they can't let go because it's too fascinating. And so this is how the specialty tea market is growing, as people get to realise there's a lot to learn. And so from my point of view, what I like to do is I like to learn, because we never know it all. We always are students of tea. I like to learn what's happening in different places. I like to understand the difference between mass production in a factory that churns out millions of tons of tea every year, to the small villages in various countries. That could be Vietnam or China or Japan or almost anywhere in the world, where small quantities of tea are made, where the one farmer knows everything about that tea he's making and can pass that information on to the retailer or the consumer. And so there's always a story behind the tea. And if there's a story behind the tea, then people are going to engage. And if there's a story that means it's a sustainable business that is benefiting the people that make the tea, harvest the tea, roll the tea, dry the tea, then it's an even more exciting story. And that's where I get very excited, when I go to little villages around the world, and I'm in a tiny village working with people who farm a little bit of this and have a few pigs and a few ducks and a crop of something else, and tea is just part of what they do for their everyday existence, then I find that absolutely fascinating, because that's how we live. And factory produced tea is obviously very important, but it doesn't excite me in the way that small village produced tea or handcrafted tea absolutely fascinates me. And having found it out, I like to pass it on, because people then get even more excited.
Yes. And I can tell you are passionate about tea.
Well, I think one of the other reasons that people are getting so interested in tea is because it's not just the drink. Tea connects to so many other aspects of life. There's the history in different countries. There's the culture in different countries. There's the brewing methods in different countries. There's the things you use to brew. All the different teawares, the pots, the glasses, the brewing equipment itself, the things you drink it from, the things that go with it to prepare the tea. Everywhere you travel in the world, there's a different story. Fashion has been influenced by tea. Music's been influenced by tea. Politics have been influenced by tea. And consequently, once you start on this exploratory journey, there's no end to it. There's absolutely no end. So whatever your interest, you will find something to fascinate you.
Wonderful. Jane, how would you just came from a tasting session that you led on rare teas. How would you describe your expertise?
I think probably what is helpful when I'm teaching other people is that I've been involved in tea for quite a long time, and I therefore understand the basics. You then apply what you know about the basics to individual manufacturing locations, because when you make tea there are certain processes that you always do for particular categories of tea, but they vary from place to place. I think I'm able to explain how that works, but I hope that what happens is that because I love the flavours and the taste and the excitement of discovering something new that is really good quality, it's that ability to highlight that for other people so they then get to enjoy what I'm presenting. You know, I don't just say this is T1, this is T2, this is T3. I try to explain this is T1 and it comes from this little village and this is why they're growing it and this is how it's made and this is the man that's making it. I try to tell a story. I mean, I'm a writer, so it's always about trying to tell the story, trying to engage people with words so that they understand something that's much more extensive and much deeper.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Well, Jane, when it comes to rare teas, this is a step above loose leaf teas in general.
Yes.
What defines a rare tea?
That's a very, very hard question because a lot of tea companies around the world will actually say they're selling rare teas. I think for me, a rare tea is really something that is hard to find, made in very small quantities, maybe even made by one tea master in one village who is then teaching the next generation how to make that particular tea. I think it's a broad definition, but I think it needs to be something that is not just standard, readily available from any tea company you go to. It's something that's a little bit more special, a little bit more remote, a little bit more obscure, but that has something to add to the overall tea story.
Well, rare seems to come with it a sense of cost or price. What makes a rare tea worth the money?
Well, I think probably just the fact that you know you're drinking something that is very special, very different, like drinking a rare wine that is not readily accessible to everybody, or a rare whiskey, or anything that's a little bit more intensified, a little bit more rarefied. And of course with teas, even though they are very expensive, the teas we drank this morning from Vietnam and Hawaii, you will be able to brew more than once. So even if you're paying $200 a kilo, or whatever it happens to be, you can brew and brew and brew. And that experience, hopefully shared with other people, is something you'll remember all your life. I will always remember my trip to Vietnam, learning about the lotus flavoured teas and then sharing it with people. I'll always remember this, and hopefully they will too. So it becomes one of those little treasured moments that builds into your tapestry of tea enjoyment.
Well, you shared that anecdote just briefly. What would be your favorite tea story?
Do you know, I think my favourite moment in my entire tea experience was when I was in Taiwan some years ago. I was presenting for a conference, and I noticed in the back row that there were 4 or 5 Buddhist monks in amongst the audience, and I was intrigued. And they came straight up to me afterwards and they said, if you've got time, we would love to invite you to visit our organic tea plantation. And so I organised for somebody to drive me up to the plantation right at the top of the mountain outside Taipei. And I got there and there was a welcome board saying, "Welcome Jane Pettigrew." And then they took us on a walking tour of the tea plantation, but the Buddhist monks rode around on quad bikes. They tucked their saffron robes up so they didn't catch in the wheels, and they rode around on quad bikes. Some of them walked, some of us rode in cars, some of us just walked behind. And that was just the most amazing moment. But then, of course, we had lunch with them. We saw how the tea factory works. We also had a very special tea ceremony, which they have adapted from the Chinese tea ceremony, but to suit what they do at this organic tea plantation. And then we talked to the monks about their life up there. They have a view out of their tea plantation across to the mountain on the opposite side of the valley, which is like a sleeping Buddha. And so we just felt so completely at peace and in harmony with nature. And these monks were absolutely involved in their tea life and their Zen Buddhist life to a degree that I've never experienced before, and it was very, very special.
You never recover from those experiences.
You never forget.
Yes. Well, Jane, if you were to suggest a path for someone who's interested in exploring loose leaf teas, what would you suggest?
I think it's important to taste as much as you possibly can, because that's the only way, like with wine, that you begin to discern the differences, to understand what you like, what you should expect from different origins. So it's a question of tasting, hopefully with people who can guide you. And so going to tasting events, going to little classes, and there are a lot of classes around the world now in every tea drinking country. People are involved in tea education. So I would say read, try and get some background information, but the actual practicality of tasting is really, really important.
Nothing short of tasting.
You can't beat tasting.
First-hand experience.
Yeah, what it's all about.
Well, let's see. Jane, if you were to sit down and have a face-to-face conversation with someone interested in tea, I mean, what would you do to fan the flame for them, to encourage them to take a further step?
I think I'd talk to them very much in the way that I've spoken to you today, to explain the layers of interest that tea actually involves, the beauty of tea, the fact that it brings a sense of calm into your life, the fact that whenever you share tea with somebody, it's a special moment. It's not just about the beverage, it's about what it brings to our lives. It's a Zen drink. It calms you down. It's got a magic ingredient called theanine, which is an amino acid, which actually completely calms you. Caffeine lifts you, helps you focus. Theanine helps to keep you calm. And it is a magic drink. And people know that. They don't know why necessarily, but they do know that that's what happens. And so for any occasion in our lives, in our everyday lives, whether it's a celebratory moment or a commiseration moment or a moment when you just need some rehydration, tea fits the bill every time.